Now we're going to introduce some geometry terms and then solve some pretty fundamental type of geometry word problems. However, if we don't remember these terms, the pretty fundamental becomes very challenging. So the most important thing you can do to understand these word problems, in addition to having algebraic skills to solve equations, which we clearly do, the next thing that we can do is we can understand or remember what these terms mean. The first term is complementary, and it means two angles that add up to 90. The next is supplementary, and that means two angles that add up to 180. Now, there's several mnemonic devices to remember which of these terms means which. I like to remember it this way. In the alphabet, the letter C comes before S, and in the numbers, 90 comes before 180. So like C comes first and 90 comes first, they pair up. Complementary means two angles that add up to 90, and S comes last and 180 comes last. Supplementary means two angles that add up to 180. So that's how I remember it, but whatever trick you can do, I know there's one where you can manipulate the C. If you draw a line straight down, it looks like a 9 for 90, and if you take the S, you can kind of make a little opposite hoop in there, and that would make it look like an 8 for 180. So whichever technique you remember, go with it, be good with it. So complementary, two angles that add up to 90. Supplementary, two angles that add up to 180. The three angles of a triangle always add up to 180 degrees. Three angles of a triangle add up to 180. An isosceles triangle has two equal sides and two equal angles, okay? Comes from the Greek word iso, meaning same. Scalis is like scale, so same scale, two sides are the same. And last but not least, the four angles of a quadrilateral always add up to 360. Okay. If there's any of these that for any reason you don't remember, write them down real quick, or screenshot the page, but make it a point to remember these things. So here's our first geometry application. One angle of a triangle is 3 times another. The measure of the third angle is 10 more than the smallest angle. Find the angles. Now, for this particular geometry application, we're not going to do a stop and start because we have another one coming right after this that's just like it. But I want to show you how to begin. Like with the perimeter problems, it's a geometry question. I like to envision things. So the first thing I do is draw out a picture. You'll notice there are 3 angles in a triangle, and it says one angle is 3 times the other angle. So I put an N for one of them, and in the other place I put a 3 in. So that's the part of the word problem that says one angle is 3 times another. And I do want to remind you, I love to underline. So that's clearly a really important sentence. So on your paper, you should underline one angle of a triangle is 3 times another. Then you take what you've underlined and you put it into the problem to help you. Next, I would underline the measure of the third angle is 10 more than the smallest angle. Now the smallest angle is clearly N. So if I'm 10 more than N, it's N plus 10. And then it says to find the angles. So once I use everything that's underlined in the first part, I don't need to look at the first part anymore, except the directions, which says find the angles. And this is where I have to remember from the previous slide that the 3 angles add up to 180. So I do the first angle, which is the N, the next angle, which is the 3N, and the third angle, which is the N plus 10, and I add them up to 180. The order of the angles is unimportant. Same side, same operation. That will give me 4N plus 10 is equal to 180. I'm sorry, 5N plus 10. 1N plus 3N is 4N plus another N is 5N. 5N plus 10 is 180. Subtracting 10 from both sides, I get 5N is 170. Dividing by 5, and I get N is equal to 34. Now, here's one of the coolest things going on the face of the earth about these geometry questions. It's so easy to check yourself. Show you what I mean. N is 34. So there it is, 34. The next answer, or the next angle, is N times 3. That's what 3N means. So if I do 3 times 34, I get 102. And the last angle is N plus 10. 34 plus 10 is 44. And then I could do a real quick mental note, okay? That's what I think the answers are, 34, 102, and 44. Then I could do a quick mental note, and all I got to do is see, do these guys add up to 180? And you bet, 34 plus 44 plus 102 does add up to 180. Okay, so that's a really good example of how to do that. Now, the next question that I want to do, where I'll teach a little first before we turn you loose, is underneath that. The measure of an angle is twice the measure of its complement. What's the angle's measure? So if I underline the important stuff, I would underline the measure of an angle is twice the measure of its complement. I may even double underline complement. The first angle is going to be n, or x. The second angle is twice that. So it'll be 2n, 2x. And that word complement's very important because complementary means adds up to 90. So there's my equation. Or well, two angles are n and 2n. There's my equation. N plus 2n is 90. Same side, same operation. 3n is 90. Dividing by 3, n is 30. Now I'm not completely done because it says here that the measure of an angle is twice the measure of its complement. So you want the bigger one, the one that's twice. And since the two angles are 30 and 60, the bigger one is 60. That's the one that you want. Okay? So one of the really cool things about these geometry questions is that there's two really cool things. First, you can always check your answers based on the geometry principles. In this case, don't 30 and 60 add up to 90? And that's what complementary means, two angles that add up to 90. And the second thing that's really important that you can do is that you're always able, well, not always, but oftentimes, it leads to pretty easy questions, not as hard as that fraction one we did in video 1. All right, stop and start, you're up. Okay, in this problem, the first angle is n, the second one is 3 times as big, so that's 3n, and the third one is 20 more than the smallest angle, so that's n plus 20. We just said before, the three angles of a triangle add up to 180, so I add them up to 180. Same side, same operation. There's still 5 n's there, but this time it's plus 20 is 180. I subtract 20 from both sides, 5n is 160. I divide by 5, I get n is 32. I mentioned a couple of times now that the really cool thing is that you can kind of check yourself here. So if n is 32, the next one is 3 times 32, which is 96. And the last one is 32 plus 20, which is 52. So that's what I think the answers are. 32, 96, and 52. And then I add up 32, 96, and 52, and I get 180. And booyah! You know you got that right. Okay, the next question on this particular sheet, card, whatever you want to call it, slide, is the measure of an angle is twice the measure of its supplement. What's the angle's measure? Well, again, it's twice, so the angles are going to be n and 2n. Supplementary, though, does not mean adds up to 90. Supplementary means adds up to 180. So n plus 2n are 180. Same side, same operation. 3n is 180. Dividing by 3, and I get that n is 60. But the other angle, if this guy's 60, the other angle has to be 120 because it's twice as big, 2n. And then I just, it wants the angle's measure. This is calling for the angle that's the bigger one. The measure of an angle is twice the measure, so 120. And it, of course, 120 plus 60 add up to 180. So you know that you got this right, okay? So those are some geometry word problems that we can talk about. Now I'm going to segue a little bit into inequalities, and I'm going to start the study of inequalities on this slide, and then I'll get it going again on the next slide. In fact, you know what? I changed my mind. We'll stop here with the geometry applications.